Hello to everybody. I'm very fascinating what Robert explained us, and he finished his last slide with technology. In fact, so we spoke today a little about managing the technology, and as I believe that many of you for many years had the opportunity to try out various technological solutions for people with hearing loss. Today, I present a thinking that arises again and again when I face new technological challenges, which have been extremely numerous in the last year. Next slide. So it is important to understand hearing loss and the use of cochlear implant. When you face with hearing loss as an adult, you don't really know much about it. And as we know, this is difficult to accept and understand. But for good integration into active life, it is good to know your loss, to understand it, and above all, to know what the possibilities are of either hearing aids or cochlear implants. It is important to know when did the complete loss occur in adulthood. To be aware of the environment in which the person with hearing loss lives, because the requirements of the environment in which the individual lives are different. For individuals and professionals, it is very important to know about the impact of emotional experience of hearing loss and the ability to communicate with the use of cochlear implant. Many people, many times, simply forget the ability to understand technology and the ability to constantly learn to use it. Constantly changing technology, constant learning is often extremely stressful in everyday life. And unfortunately, many people also do not realize how important manual skills and fine motor skills are when handling small particles of implants. For example, can you imagine how to replacing the batteries in your small cochlear implant in the cold and wind weather? Next slide, please. It is necessary that we understand and accept the specificity of person with cochlear implants. A person with cochlear implant is a deaf person. The most part, the person with cochlear implant engage in daily life and do not expose their condition. Does not matter how good are with rehabilitation, it is more difficult to function in a demanding environment if there is no noises and no masks and you require support. Also, we must understand that if you are using cochlear implant, you become fatigued faster because you are constantly focusing on listening, but also we want to participate equally. And what is also necessary to know is that cochlear implant users usually are not technical experts. And when we have a problem using our technology, we can't just call and solve the problem, because still a lot of people who use cochlear implant have trouble understanding over the phone. Next slide. So let's go on. Basic, one processor. Most laymen imagine that when you put a speech processor on your head, you can listen well. Many people do not know that you have a long way of rehabilitation behind you and receive, and that you must always be aware that your speech processor must be full and that you must always have a charger or batteries with you whenever you go. So, but if you have to, next slide, the technique is advancing and it is quite difficult to imagine that the sound can be amplified even more so that the understanding can be significantly improved. Sometimes such an unimaginable phone conversation are made possible by advances in technology. Bluetooth is something extremely positive and a technique that makes it possible as well. But sometimes we are the ones who just don't know how to use the option we have, because it happens that no one explains it to us. It is not so simple. And if you have maybe two processors with different techniques, well, it can be complicated, but that is not all. Next slide. Companies have predicted that the batteries on the processors may run out. So there is the possibility of spare batteries that are just different from the models. But even with that, you need to think about what are you need to have with you. And if you have two, there is a lot of materials. Next slide, please. Pairing two devices. It is hard to understand what all is possible. Small icon on your mobile phone allows pairing, and then you can use mobile phone for settings your cochlear implant. The younger generation understands all the procedures much better and also faster, gaining knowledge by the way. But older people need a lot of help, explanation, and also practical demonstration of how they can start the process. Unfortunately, support is not available in many places, especially not in your native language. And as I mentioned, the problem is that a phone call doesn't help much here. I myself found years ago that it's extremely useful to use a social network to talk to a company, because sometimes you have such a specific situation that only an expert involved in a development can explain it to you. My very positive experience is when I asked how to connect to generation of my processor through the social media in Medell. They answer me in some hours, and when they didn't know exactly the answer, they answer me next day when they research how they can solve my problem. So that was very, very positive. Okay, next slide, please. So it is imperative to be aware that listening with implant is something completely different is to connecting with other devices. It is not very simple always. Next slide, please. So do people, there are some questions. If people know how to use everything they have, do the technicians explain to them everything they have at their disposal? Does anyone teach them how to use what they have at their disposal? Do they remember to read all the instructions they get? Do they remember to look at YouTube, for example, where there are a lot of good videos using the technology? Do they know how to use YouTube? Do they remember on it? Or they use maybe a messenger conversation to solve a problem they are having? Does any of their loved ones master the technology they have available? That's not true. Usually nobody knows how to help you. Is there always a good Wi-Fi signal that they can use? What if the electricity runs out? Next slide. So for conclusion, I can say that to understand that cochlear implants are a great solution and enable people to have a much better quality of life. That using an implant requires a lot of energy, learning, knowledge, skills, adaptation, and understanding, and a peaceful environment is desirable. And the participation of users and manufacturers must be constant, as this is the only way to create the technology that every cochlear implant user can actually use. And for the end, I can say, as always, I'm very grateful for all technique, which allows me to live normal life. Even I spent a lot of my free time in studying how to connect and use everything what they offer to me. And also, we need to be very flexible and have a lot of ideas how to find a solution for problems which we have sometimes. This is all for me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Darja. You're always inspiring and sharing all that with us in a constructive way, but one that shows actually how challenging it is managing this technology. There's some messages starting to come through now, Brian, that people have been listening, and people who share the same experiences, I think. Brian?
Yeah, and a really consistent thing coming out in the questions, and something I wanted to ask is that technology requirements around cochlear implants and the apps need so much technical support often from users in terms of making them really successful. And you made the point there at the end of your presentation about how crucial it is for implant companies to work with users. And I was wondering how much, in a way, you think that the successful use of this technology is almost expecting too much from users, and whether there needs to be more input in a way that as more iterations are designed, that actually things become simpler. We look in other areas of technology, and the whole drive has always been to, take user error out of technology in a way, to make it so simple that everyone can use it. And yet, in cochlear implants, we still seem to be in a stage where it's very complicated for users to actually grapple with the technology. And I wondered if there was more that could be done about that user engagement and user design that would help with this.
You,
Yes,
Darja?
I think that that many times, especially in small countries like Slovenia, is that manufacturer stores which represent companies are not, in fact, so well, I don't know, educated how we can manage with all technology which they offer. Also, I think that when that companies which have mobile phones need to know, if you buy a good telephone, they need to offer you also some kind of course how to connect everything. Many times you are just alone, and many times you are not able to use all that possible technical devices which they gave you. And as I said, it is many companies have very good videos in YouTube channel, but people in fact don't use them.
No, really interesting. And Leo has raised the point here about making sure that users are engaged in rehab teams all the way through. Would that be something you would see as very useful?
Yes, but when I am also included in rehabilitation process in our clinic, but my speech therapists are not very good in all technical devices. It is she understands the cochlear implant and the program and how setting or fitting the cochlear implants, but something completely another is to understand how I can use my cochlear implant with my telephone, how to connect in Bluetooth, with Bluetooth connection, how to use my computer with my cochlear implants. And that is not so simple, especially if you have two different generations of cochlear implants. It is not so many examples that people get two equal cochlear implants. And I'm very sad that they didn't tell me that in 1 year there will be another generation of processor outside. I will wait if I knew that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. And that is not, I feel that in that moment that is not fair to me. And I have quite a lot of complication to use. I show you on my example, and I believe that such an examples are there are many of such an examples.